Imagine waking up in your camper with a backpack full of fresh venison, a hefty loaf of homemade bread, and some delicious wild game sausage. It's still warm from the fire where you cooked it, just before bed! That's not a dream. It's a reality that awaits those who master the skills in this video. But wait, there's more. We're going to show you how to turn your harvest into mouth-watering meals. And we'll even teach you how to prepare popular camp foods like pemmican, jerky, and dried root vegetables. Don't miss this. This is the first installment in our Mastering Wild Game series brought to you by Topo's Designs, an industry leader in outdoor products for hunters, trappers, and outdoor enthusiasts. Since 1972, Topo's Designs has provided quality American-made game calls. Decoys, scent control, products, and accessories. Their products are widely recognized as among the best in the world for quality, performance, and craftsmanship. Topo's Designs products have been used to take countless game animals and have helped hunters of all skill levels fill their freezers and create lasting memories. In this video, we'll cover basic techniques for harvesting wild game. But stay tuned for future installments in this series where we go deeper into the woods with experts to learn advanced skills like sausage making, advanced trapping techniques, and much more. A successful hunt starts long before sunrise. You can't catch fish when your line isn't in the water. You can't bag a deer when your stand is empty. And if you're after critters like rabbits or squirrels, you need to be out in the woods or fields before the sun comes up. The same goes for foraging. If you want to find ripe berries or morel mushrooms, you need to get up early and get out there. So put those extra few minutes into getting ready and you'll have a better chance at a successful outing. Now let's talk about field dressing. Whether you've taken down a white-tailed deer, a wild boar, or a mountain goat, it's important to field dress properly. This will help keep your meat as fresh and wholesome as possible. First, make sure your knife is clean and sharp. This will make the process quicker and more sanitary. Then, if it hasn't already been done, quickly and cleanly dispatch your animal. Now is the time for any final field dressing. This may include removing the guts, heart, and lungs, or other organs. If you've taken a large animal, you may even need to use a sharp stick or pole to help break open the ribs and remove these organs. Remember, sanitation is key. Make sure everything is removed and then wash your hands thoroughly. Some people might think that gutting a deer or cleaning a fish is gross, but it doesn't have to be. If you're planning to eat what you catch or harvest, take the time to do it right. Sure, it might be a little messy, but it's all part of the process. And once you've got your hands dirty, it's time to get those hands washed. Use cold, soapy water and scrub up for at least 20 seconds. And don't forget to dry them thoroughly before you start prepping the meat. Once you've got your freshly harvested game back at camp, you'll want to get started on processing it. Depending on what you've caught and the conditions where you're camping, you may need to begin prepping immediately. For example, if you're camping in warm weather and you've got a deer hanging in your game pole, you'll want to get that processed as soon as possible. On the other hand, if you've got a cooler and it's cold out, you can hang your game and wait until the next day to get to work. When it comes to processing game, the first step is always the same. You need to hang it up. This could mean putting it in a game pole or hanging it from a tree limb. This is important because it allows the meat to drain and it also helps to tenderize it. Once the meat has drained, you can start to process it. This usually means removing the hide. Some people prefer to do this by hand, while others like to use a mechanical die-herring machine. No matter which method you choose, make sure to wear gloves to protect your hands. After the hide has been removed, you can start cutting up the meat. Depending on what you plan to do with the meat, you may want to cut it into smaller pieces or leave it whole. You'll also need to remove any unwanted organs or other debris. Finally, you'll need to trim away any excess fat or gristle. Once the meat has been processed, you can start to cook it. This could mean grilling it over a fire, frying it in a pan, or baking it in an oven. No matter how you cook it, make sure to cook it thoroughly to kill any harmful bacteria. When it comes to cooking wild game, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. First, game meat is leaner than domestic meat, so it's important to cook it slowly and low so that it doesn't dry out. Second, game meat is often tougher than domestic meat, so it needs to be cooked longer to break down the fibers. Finally, game meat can be very flavorful, so it's important to let it speak and not overpower it with too many seasonings or sauces. One of the most popular ways to cook wild game is to grill it over a fire. This is a great way to cook steaks, chops, and roasts. Just be sure to cook them slowly and low so they don't dry out. Another popular method is braising. This is a great way to cook tougher cuts of meat, like venison shoulder or pork shoulder. Braising involves cooking the meat in a liquid for a long period of time, which helps to break down the fibers and make the meat more tender. Finally, you can also try smoking. Smoking is a great way to add flavor to wild game. Just be sure to smoke the meat low and slow so it doesn't dry out. Pemmican is a traditional North American food consisting of dried meat, fat, and sometimes berries or other fruits. It's a high-energy food that was traditionally eaten by indigenous peoples and early European explorers. Pemmican was a staple of the fur trade and was often traded between indigenous peoples and European traders. Pemmican is easy to make and keep for long periods of time. In fact, it's one of the best ways to preserve meat for long-term storage. It can last for years if kept in a cool, dry place. Pemmican is a versatile food that can be eaten in many different ways. It can be eaten as is, crumbled into smaller pieces, or mixed with other foods like oatmeal or soup. Pemmican is a nutritious food that's high in protein, fat, and carbohydrates. It's a good source of vitamins and minerals like vitamin A, iron, and zinc. Let's get to it. The first step is to grind the meat. This can be done by hand or with a meat grinder. If you're using a meat grinder, be sure to clean it thoroughly before and after use. Once the meat has been ground, it's time to add the fat. The fat can be added in small pieces, or it can be rendered and then strained. Be sure to render the fat slowly so that it doesn't scorch. Once the fat has been added, it's time to mix everything together. This can be done by hand or with a mixer. Be sure to mix well so that the fat is evenly distributed throughout the meat. Once the mixture is well combined, it's time to let it rest. Let it sit for at least 30 minutes so that the flavors have time to blend. Once it's rested, it's time to form the pemmican into cakes. To do this, you'll need to roll the dough out into even pieces. Be sure to roll each piece out into a thin sheet. Once the sheets are even, you can roll them up and then tuck in the ends to seal them. Now it's time to dry the pemmican. This can be done by air drying or freeze drying. Air drying can take up to 2 weeks, so be patient. Once the pemmican is dry, it's ready to eat. You can eat it as is or crumble it into smaller pieces. You can also mix it with other foods like oatmeal or soup. Jerky is another popular way to preserve meat. Jerky is simply meat that has been dried so that it can be stored for long periods of time. Jerky is easy to make, and it's also very versatile. You can eat it as a snack, or you can add it to soups or stews. Jerky is also high in protein and low in fat, making it a healthy snack option. To make jerky, you'll need to start with a lean cut of meat. You can use any type of meat for jerky, but beef, deer, and turkey are the most popular. Once you've chosen your meat, it's time to cut it into strips. The strips should be about 1/4 inch thick and as wide as you like. The length of the strips doesn't matter. Once the strips have been cut, it's time to marinate them. This is optional, but it can add a lot of flavor to your jerky. There are many different types of marinades that you can use, but a simple mixture of soy sauce and honey is a good place to start. To marinate the strips, simply place them in a bowl and pour the marinade over them. Let them marinate for at least 2 hours, or even overnight if you have the time. Once the strips have been marinated, it's time to dry them. You can dry your jerky in the oven or in the sun. To dry them in the oven, preheat the oven to its lowest setting and leave the door open slightly. Place the strips of jerky on a baking sheet and dry them for 2 to 3 hours, or until they're leathery and not sticky. If you want to dry your jerky in the sun, simply lay them out on a piece of cardboard or paper and let them sit in the sun for 2 to 3 days. You'll know that they're done when they're leathery and not sticky. Once the jerky is dry, it's ready to eat. You can eat it as a snack or add it to soups or stews. Root vegetables like potatoes and carrots are great sources of carbohydrates and fiber. They're also packed with vitamins and minerals like vitamin C, potassium, and magnesium. Root vegetables are high in fiber, which can help regulate digestion and prevent constipation. And unlike leafy greens, root vegetables can be stored for long periods of time without spoiling. When it comes to cooking root vegetables, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, root vegetables are high in starch, so they can absorb a lot of water when cooked. Be sure to cook them until they're tender to prevent them from drying out. Second, Root vegetables often have tough skins, so it's important to peel them before cooking. Finally, root vegetables are very versatile and can be cooked in many different ways. They can be boiled, roasted, or mashed. You can even slice them up and add them to soups or stews. No matter what you decide to make, be sure to cook root vegetables thoroughly to kill any harmful bacteria. Whether you're a seasoned outdoors person or just starting out, we hope you've learned something from this video. And if you're looking for more tips on mastering wild game, stay tuned for future installments in this series. Until then, happy hunting, trapping, and foraging.